Hi, welcome to a Herbalist Anatomy and Physiology. And today we're going to be talking about the movement of fluid in the body. A really important topic for herbalists and herbal medicine. My name is Abrah Arneson, and I'm a clinical herbal therapist. I practice in Ottawa, Ontario, as well as in my home in the beautiful Gatineau Hills. Usually I record these videos downstairs in my apothecary, but today I have family members at home, so I'm recording upstairs in my classroom, and this is where I teach herbal medicine. So it's a fun space because we've got lots of windows and good light and lots of wood. It's very herbally, very plant-like. So today we're going to talk about interstitial fluid, extracellular fluid, intercellular fluid, basically the water in the body, and how it moves, and how when there are health challenges, the water element often is not moving in a good way through the body, and how this affects our overall sense of health and well-being, and how plants are so good at moving water or nourishing water, or yeah, let's just do it. Okay, so let's get started. One thing I just want to say, which I say at the beginning of all these videos, is that herbal medicine is, in my mind, the relationship between plants and the human being. Um, it's really important to think about the relationship between plants and the body as a herbalist, as opposed to just thinking, oh, this herb does this. You want to think about how is the body mind of the human being interacting with the plant, and how is the plant interacting with the body mind. And it's that interaction which makes the medicine. So this is really the case when we're talking about the movement of fluids in the body. So let's get started. So this is a big deal. So human beings are 50 to 65% water. It sort of depends on your age, your body weight, your sex, but that's a lot of water. That's a lot of water to move. Water needs to move, otherwise it becomes stagnant, and that's not good. Where does our water come from? 20% from food comes from we get 20% from food. So especially if you're eating lots of fruits and veg, that's a great source of water. Uh, 200 mils are made every day by our mitochondria in our cells. So our body's actually making water. Now, 200 mils is not a lot of water. It's 40 teaspoons of water. But it is amazing that water cannot be made in laboratories, but our bodies make water, as does every body, plant, or animal that has mitochondria is making water right at this moment. Um, our colon is a really good reservoir for reserving water. So our colon reabsorbs 2 mils of water per minute. So that's just under a half teaspoon of water every couple of minutes. Our colon is reabsorbing. And then our kidneys, uh, our body, our kidneys filter 180 liters of water a day, and it releases 1.5 to 2 liters a day. So that's not that much water to be eliminated compared to how much water the body's actually processing, the kidneys actually moving through and filtering. And then our skin also releases water. So our skin releases approximately 300 to 400 mils of water every day. And then we breathe out about a third of a liter to half a liter every day. as well. So all these systems, our kidneys, our colon, our skin, our mitochondria, they're all part of moving water, replenishing water, uh, filtering water, cleaning water. They're all part of it. Uh, this 50%, at least 50% of our body is being processed through these systems. So when we're talking about water, we're talking about our whole body. So let's just look at a couple of more slides I've got here. So that's basically what I was just saying. See your notes. I have this outlined in our notes, and just I love to travel, so I feel guilty every time I fly. But anyways, so a 3-hour flight, you lose 1.5 liters of water. So drink when you're flying. Here's how some of the water is distributed in our body. I really love the kidneys, 83% water. And I was thinking about when I was looking at this of when I was a student and I took some kidney cadaver anatomy, and I remember squeezing the kidney and it was like a sponge. And I love the brain, 75% water. If you think about it, our blood is only 83% water and our brain is 75% water. That's not a big difference. Our brain, yeah, it's interesting to me how much water is in different places. Even our bones, 22% water. And we have all sorts of different names for the water in our body, and we're going to do a little bit of language now. So plasma, that's the fluid that your red and white blood cells are floating around in your blood vessels. So this fluid here is called plasma. Your interstitial fluid, and it contains 3 liters of water. Your interstitial fluid is the fluid that your cells float in. So, and that's 11 liters of water. And then your intercellular fluid, the fluid inside your cells, that's a total of 28 liters of water. So most of the water in your body is inside your cells. And that makes the water in 75 trillion cells in your body. This is amazing to me. And this is why hydration is so important and good fluid balance in the body, because you don't want your cells to get dehydrated. Then things start going askew. Very, very important. So let's talk a little bit more about water. Physiologists are interesting in how they talk about water in the body. They talk about it in different compartments. So tissues, and a tissue is a cluster of similar cells. So for example, people talk about liver tissue, that would be liver cells, or lung tissue, that would be lung cells. A cluster of lung tissue would be a cluster of lung cells. So then they talk about the water in compartments. And I know I'm like, oh, compartment, I don't like that word. But I thought about it a little bit more. And in TCM, they're always saying earth contains water, earth contains water. So water needs to be contained. Without water being contained, human beings would be puddles that would just evaporate in the sun, or, run off into a ditch. Our bodies are a container for water. So we want to think about the compartments. And it's really important. The body works really hard at maintaining these different compartments for water, because water needs to stay in its place, and at the same time, it needs to flow. So you think about the plumbing in your house, right? You get a leak in a pipe, big problem. But if the water is not flowing to your kitchen sink, big problem. So water's contained and flows. So interstitial fluid is the fluid found in intercellular spaces. It's really important because it's the medium from which substances flow from your capillary beds to your cells, and from your cells back to your capillary beds. and also in and out of into the lymphatic system. So many times the interstitial fluid is compared to an ocean. We're going to look at that comparison in a couple of slides. But basically, it's the medium through which everything moves. Some people call the interstitial fluid, this water, intercellular communication, or the material which facilitates intercellular communication. I love that idea that the water facilitates communication. And, you know, a lot of people talk about the water element as the element that controls emotion. I'm kind of like, yes, no to that. But emotion is uh, really important in facilitating our communication. So, for example, if someone's really angry and yelling, it's really hard to pick up on that, on what they're saying. All we pick up on is like, oh, I got to get out of this person's presence as fast as possible. So, if you think about the water as the means by which the communication flows, that's the interstitial fluid. It's a, you know, so here's a picture of the interstitial fluid that I love this picture. First of all, I love the colors, but yeah, so here's your capillary beds, here's the lymphatic vessel, and all these things here, these are all connective tissue, and they're creating the compartments for the water to flow through. This is a really important piece. Again, we're into this idea of controlling the movement of the water in the body. It doesn't just flow, however, it has a specific way of flowing, and the connective tissue is controlling that flow. This is also called extracellular matrix, and the next video in this series will be on extracellular matrix, where I'll talk about that in at length. And so here's your organs. Here's some cells. Here's your gap junctions. Those are your little proteins. Remember when we were talking about leaky gut in previous videos, how let's pretend this is the lining of the small intestine and the gap junctions, and then there's the leaky gut, and it flows down into the interstitial fluid. That's really a big problem. So this is always, you will always need to repair the epithelial tissue, the tissue lining the lumens of the organ, the lumens of the body, so the digestive tract in particular. Otherwise, you end up with toxin, particularly bacteria, floating into the interstitial tissue you don't want there. You also have, these are white blood cells, fibroblasts, repairing connective tissue, carbon dioxide flowing back into capillary beds, oxygen flowing out of capillary beds. Here's a big cell. So there's a lot of movement. Complex place. Here's interstitial fluid in your brain. So here's your neurons. Here's your astrocyte. Here's a blood vessel. Here's interstitial fluid in a plant. These are chloroplasts. This would be the outer surface of the plant. So interstitial fluid, this water, all life forms use it. There's no life form that does not have a large component of water going on. And remember, all life forms make water in their mitochondria, but we also need water to come into our bodies. So you have to water your plants, for example, or your gardens, like enjoy nice rain. Okay, extracellular fluid is any fluid that is outside of your cells. So that can be plasma, that could be, synovial fluid. That's the fluid that stops your joints from creaking and rubbing and causing pain. It could be your cerebral spinal fluid, your lymph fluid, any fluid in the body. When we say extracellular fluid, that's what we're talking about. In this video, we're very concerned with interstitial fluid, not so much extracellular fluid. So here's an image of some extracellular fluid in a plant called mouse cress. So here's the cells, and this is how they're letting the fluid in and out of their cells. This is the connective tissue within the plant, and then all the rest is the fluid. Super cool image. And this is the plant, mouse cress. Reminds me a little bit of shepherd's purse. And then we have our interstitial fluid, or our intercellular fluid, where most of the fluids in our body are contained in the cell. And it basically provides a medium for intercellular communication. It also creates a medium for that communication to take place. This is like a microcosm of the rest of your body. And it helps the cell. The other thing about the water element is it's sticky. A lot of times people think about the water element as not sticky, as something that flows. But if you think about how rain falls, it falls in drops that stick together, or if you put two drops of water side by side, they go boom, stick together. They're magnetic. It's a magnet. Like, my little lake where I swim, it doesn't like just flow off anywhere. Even fog kind of moves along, or clouds move along together. They stick. They're not just diffuse throughout the sky, although there is diffuse water throughout the sky, but water is sticky. It sticks together. And that's a really important piece of thinking. So when this would help this cell maintain its integrity, this tension that water has that pulls it together. So this is a little exploration of I like to talk about the body and use examples we find in nature. So think about your cells like unicellular organisms. So they all have their own little life, and they're all doing their own thing. They're in dialogue with the rest of the cells of your body, or at least let's hope so, because that's kind of like what happens with a cancer cell. Is it loses the plot of the dialogue or the communication. It kind of goes rogue. It's not playing well with other cells. It's not communicating well. So there's these cells that have their own intrinsic identity that are in dialogue with the rest of the cells of your body, floating around in an ocean. And that water, it facilitates the communication and the movement of information and resources between cells. Think of it like that. And that's very much how unicellular organisms live in the ocean. And I remember when I first saw this picture, and I love swimming in the ocean. I just love swimming in the ocean. And I was like, ooh, I don't know if I can swim in the ocean anymore after looking at this picture. But luckily, I can just blank it out of my mind and go for a nice swim. So we also want to think about water carries, right? So that's like the medium of communication. And to carry information, it also needs to flow. That's right. It's not just things moving through the water, but the water is carrying things to other places. So when in the spring, which we're moving into a spring right now where I live, and I live in a very snowy place. So there's a lot of snow, and there's a lot of melt, and there's a lot of mud, and it's also hilly where I live. So I was in the forest the other day, and the snow is melting, and it's carrying the soil down. It's distributing the soil from the top to the bottom. That's why when you wildcraft, you always pick your plants from the bottom up, so that the plants will flow down. The seeds will flow down the hill and not try to go uphill. Things flow down with the water. It's, so water just redistributes, but it has to move for that redistribution. And different densities of water flow in different ways. And water, depending on what it's carrying, has different densities. So here's a river. Looks like it's running through a recent clear cut. That's how I think this looks. And because of the clear cut, the the forest has lost its integrity. It's lost its ability to hold the earth in place. And this water's probably pretty thick. Here we have some nice mountain kind of water, that nice turquoise color. It's very clear, it probably runs very quickly. Good fluid. Here's nice flow. The water's very clear. So different densities of water flow in different ways. And that's a big concept in herbal medicine. Huge concept. And that's basically what we're going to talk about for the rest of the video. So what's passing through the interstitial fluid between blood vessels? Here's another. This is all the connective tissue. These are cells, and this is the fluid that it's all floating in. So what passes is hormones, oxygen, carbon dioxide, electrolytes, vitamins, trace minerals, phytoconstituents. So if you take a plant that's high, let's say in flavonoids, and you drink your hibiscus tea, hibiscus high in flavonoids, and you're drinking your hibiscus tea, those flavonoids are absorbed into your gut, absorbed into your bloodstream. From your bloodstream, they go into your interstitial fluid, and then they begin to interact with cell membranes, which leads them to interact with mitochondrial membranes. They have to pass through the interstitial fluid. So therefore, you have to have a good flowing, clean interstitial fluid. Fats and sugars, sugar is really hard on. You want to think about sugar as like a thickening agent. Think about like sugar as like Jello. I don't know. Some of you are probably quite a bit younger than me. But when I was a kid, we used to have Jello for dessert. And Jello was basically colored sugar with water in it, stirred, and then it solidified into this jelly, and we'd eat it. And horrors of horrors. No wonder I had cavities as a kid. But anyways, sugar thickens. So if you're having a lot of sugar, that fluid that your cells are floating in are going to thicken up. Enzymes, growth factors, everything, anything that is moving through your blood and is being taken up by your cells for nourishment, communication, understanding, repair, anything that has to travel through interstitial fluid. So let's talk about the elements. The elements are a little bit like old school herbal medicine, traditional herbal medicine. And I find while I do enjoy a biomedical model of herbal medicine, I do rely heavily on looking at ideas of water, fire, air, earth. In herbal medicine, these are very old concepts with plant medicine, and I find particularly helpful for me in describing the basic landscape of the body. Like, what's this landscape of the body? Is this a boggy body? Is this a dry body? Is this a really hot body? Is this a cold body? Is this a cold person? Is their mind cold too, right? It really helps me understand, is there too much wind? Is there not enough wind? Really helps me understand the body when I'm trying to choose good herbs for it and then choose good herbs. So let's look a little bit at the elements. People get really confused by elements, but and there's nothing esoteric in the elements. You can do a deep study of the elements, which will take you into more esoterical material, but really it's just an assessment of landscape. What does this garden need, or what is in excess of this garden? So water has a few principles that you want to keep in mind. One, water controls fire, obviously, right? You want to put out a fire, put some water on it, right? Or water also helps distribute heat. So when we talk about fire, what we're talking about essentially is the heat in the body. And heat can be cold, right? What is the temperature of the body? That's what we're talking about with the fire. So the water element carries the temperature of the body through the fire element throughout the body, creating an even heat. So, the hands aren't freezing cold, or the feet aren't freezing cold, and then the gut is really hot. Like, the water element will help balance out the fire element in the body. It also helps contain it. Like, so example, if you think about a lake, and in July, the lake gets nice and warm to swim in because the water is holding the heat. And in the morning, when the temperature is lowered down at night, and you go down to the lake, you'll see a mist, the water coming off, and that's the fire element leaving with the water back into the sky as the temperature shifts between the sky, the air, and the water. So the water carries the fire element, but it also helps maintain an even temperature. And water is sticky, as I already mentioned. Fire is basically temperature. It's associated with oxygen. And fire element, an excess of fire element will thin out water. Low fire element can cause stagnancy. This is tricky because you can have too much heat and stagnancy as well. That's often associated with tension, but yeah, so it's tricky. But often you can use fire, the fire element in plants like cayenne, to thin out the water element. A nice example would be like, you go and you bite, someone dares you to eat a cayenne pepper, and you bite it, and then all of a sudden your eyes are running and your nose is running and you're salivating. That's the fire element moving the water element. It's actually an inflammatory response, but we'll just keep it really simple. Fire element moving water. Excessive fire element moving water element. So this would be an example of boggy. The water isn't really moving. Stuff is growing that shouldn't be growing, right? Because water is a great medium for growing things. Anyone starting their seeds right now will know that, right? You got to put water in to get those seeds to grow. So water is very good at facilitating growth. You don't necessarily want all this stuff growing. Murky, cloudy. You can see these clouds and eyes often. If you know anything about iridology, you're looking at someone's eyes, you're looking to see if there's clouds. And the clouds very much look like something like this in iridology. That's poorly flowing water. Whereas this would be dry. This is a state called atrophy. And this is cracked. This is dry, not enough water. The tissues are dried out. And this is quite a serious state because it's really hard to get, when the soil is like this, it's really hard to get it to reabsorb water in a good way. It takes gentle, patient applying moisture to this kind of terrain to rehydrate the tissues. It's quite a serious condition. And you'll see this, in your clients with cracks in the tongue, or you'll see cracks on their skin, even if their skin is really dry. They'll even tell you, I just feel dried out. I feel so dry inside. I'm so thirsty, and it's like I'm not even absorbing the water. That's this state. And you have to be careful with herbal medicine. Some people like to take herbs all the time, all the time, all the time, and like, I'm a herbalist. That's what I do. Is I use herbs to support people, but I also use herbs to support my own life. And a lot of herbs are drying. Any astringent, bitter herbs, herbs high in volatile oils, carrying a lot of heat, they can all be quite drying. So if people are taking those herbs all the time, for an extended period of time, they can dry out the tissues of their body. So be careful with that. Like, make sure that you're not overtaking dry herbs, your astringents. Not great. It's sort of like, I love, 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 love black tea. And I'm addicted to black tea, actually. And I put some honey in my black tea to help counter that effect, the drying effect of the tannins in the black tea, the astringency. one could say I'm addicted to honey, not black tea, but I actually think it's black tea I love. Okay, so here you have, again, cold. Cold is not great for the movement of the water element, frozen. Nothing's going to move through this landscape. Believe me, I live in the north, and when it's super cold and everything's frozen, nothing is moving. Whereas you think if you heat this up, everything starts flowing. So the fire creates movement. Heat creates movement of the water element. Cold freezes. Here's a cold person. Some people who practice herbal medicine will recognize this person right away, right? Like they can never get warm. They probably lack they look slightly malnourished, they're usually, they don't look like they have great nourishment, like they're not all rosy cheeks and vibrant. They look kind of like their hair might not be super shiny. They have poorly flowing interstitial fluid. And that means that the movement of nutrients and hormones and everything else isn't flowing in a good way. It's could be a lack of the water element. It could be tension, but cold creates tension and nutrient. What are they eating? Maybe they have poor connective tissue integrity, and connective tissue is made mostly with protein. Maybe they don't have enough protein in their diet. So it's a complicated picture, but it's also the plants kind of have this knowing on this profound relationship with water. And uh, yeah, I don't want to kind of go like woo, but there's just like this intuitive understanding of how to work with the water element in bodies, in soil, in the environment that plants have. They're connected to the water. They are water. So air, so often the fire element will get the water element moving, but it's actually the air element that perpetuates the movement. So when a herbalist talks about stagnancy, sometimes they'll say, okay, let's use the air element to get things moving here. And the plants, for me, which I associate mostly with the air element, are bitters. Oh, sorry, this is a picture of stagnancy. So here you've got this hard. Think of this as a hard tissue, impenetrable. This would be atrophy state. And then you've got this water trying to flow through this narrow channel, and it's thick. This is stagnancy, lack of movement. So bitter herbs are air element. They create the movement. I did a video on bitter pungent herbs under the series called Nuance of Herbal Medicine. And in that, I talk about how the bitters stimulate an immune response in the body, and the immune response is very, very dynamic response. It creates all sorts of movement. It creates the movement of water. It creates the movement of cilia. It opens up blood vessels. It creates all sorts of movement. And as soon as you take a bitter herb, it increases movement in the digestive system. It deepens the breath. It creates movement in the breath. As soon as you have a bitter herb, you're stimulating movement within the body. And then I picked elecampane because it's a bitter pungent. Some people call it an aromatic bitter, or a bitter aromatic. And that means it has volatile oils, and volatile oils are phytoconstituents that carry the fire element. So here you have that double movement. Fire creates movement of water. Remember, high heat creates movement of water. Think of the cayenne pepper. And then the bitter principle as well. So these plants create movement. So whenever there's that state of stagnancy like this, use a bitter pungent. You don't have to use them for long. Just get things moving. There's lots of them. Angelica is one of my favorites. Elecampane, Chorus calamus, also called rat root, or Yeah, there's all sorts of them. Osha, um, lovage, really easy one to grow in your garden is lovage. Yeah, rosemary, some people feel rosemary is a bitter pungent. There's all sorts of them. Okay, so the earth element and the water element have such an interesting relationship. First of all, the earth element is the container. So when we looked at that picture way back here, where was it? Of the connective tissue, this stuff, this extracellular matrix, this is all earth element. It's all containing the water. This stuff is so important. Otherwise, we'd just be a puddle with like these bones sticking up, like terrible for your skin. So the earth element, this is the connective tissue. It contains the water element. If the earth element is not well tended to, which means good nutrition, usually there's problems, either dryness or bogginess. The other thing of the earth element is the earth element supplies the minerals that the body needs. And we just need them. Our body, so much happens with minerals. I'm a huge magnesium fan. I take a lot of magnesium. And it makes movement in my body so much easier, magnesium. So the earth element is both like the minerals your body uses for making tissues, making earth, but it also is the container, the earth element. And stinging nettles, it's one of my, if you need to move the water element, you can use stinging nettles. Stinging nettles is like the couch potato plant. It's for the people who are couch potatoes. You've been sitting on the couch all winter eating potato chips, and that like boggy, oh, I can't move, feeling kind of like groggy in the brain, some brain fog. Nettles, it will get movement going on, and it's very high in minerals. I often think of nettles as earth element. It makes us a good, strong container to move about the world in without losing our water element. Okay, so let's talk about how this water moves about in the body. So we have to start with the capillary beds. This is an image of a capillary. I love this image. I like the colors. I'm into color. I like the way the stains. This isn't actually what your tissues look like. This is stained, but I like the colors in this. Anyways, so capillaries are single cell. So these are your red blood cells moving along, dum-dee-dum-dee-dum, through the capillary one at a time. Along the walls of the capillary are single cells, and there's little gaps between each cell where fluid, plasma, flows out carrying hormones, minerals, vitamins, all sorts of, fats. Everything your body needs flows out those little oxygen flows out those cells, and then the waste product flows back in the little gaps in your capillaries. And the blood, and this is also where, like, think about your capillary beds like roundabouts. I don't know if you have roundabouts where you live, but we have roundabouts where I live. And so you can go around and you can go out different ways, right? So it's like a roundabout. You go round, and then it goes out back towards the heart, or it goes, or it's coming away from the heart. And arterial circulation is moving away from the heart, and it contains oxygen. In the capillary beds, it releases the oxygen, and then the venous circulation is going back towards the heart, and it's collecting carbon dioxide, the wastes of cellular respiration. So here's another image. So a lot of times what we don't see when we're talking about the capillary beds, so here's the oxygenated blood flowing, and the plasma is carrying the oxygen out of the capillary beds into the interstitial fluid to interact with the cells. And then the veins are picking up the waste or the carbon dioxide, and it's going to take it back to the heart to get back to the heart and the lungs to be reoxygenated. And in the middle, this green is the lymphatic system. And what the lymphatic system is, I like the image of the mop. They say the lymphatic system is the mop of the interstitial fluid. So whatever isn't reabsorbed by the veins is picked up by the lymphatic system and is sent back into the venous system, where it goes through circulation into the kidneys, where the kidneys then process, right? Remember, they're filtering all of it, and any excess fluid will be released through the kidneys at that point. A lot of plants that are lymphatics are diuretics, and we're going to look at that. And they're diuretics because of their lymphatic action. So this can get a bit complicated, and I'm not the best at explaining this, but I just want you to get a sense of this, because this is something you see in herbal medicine, or at least I see it, especially when I'm working with people with chronic infection like Lyme disease, as well as cancer. And this is a really important thing. And we can really work well with this to help rebalance the different compartments of fluid. Okay, so these little guys here are a protein called albumin. Notice they're protein. We need protein in our diets to maintain good balance between fluids. Proteins help build tissues, but in this situation, albumin is made in the liver by protein, from protein, and it's used to create a good pressure in the blood vessels. So as the blood flows through the heart, and there's this arterial contraction pushing it through, it pushes, that is pushing the fluids out between the spaces in the cells. So it's pushing the plasma out into the interstitial fluid, delivering all that product, all that oxygen, hormones, trace minerals to the cells, for the cells to eat or absorb or use for their metabolism. And then that pressure, as all that leaves, the pressure gradient falls down, and the veins become lower pressure than the interstitial fluid, and it starts to suck the interstitial fluid back in. And the albumin is a really important regulator of that process. Okay. Now, if we have leaky blood vessels, leaky capillary beds is basically what we're talking about. Not like your aorta isn't leaky. If your aorta was leaky, you'd have a big problem. You know, that's 911, go there immediately. But your leaky capillary beds are very common. And what happens is the albumin starts flowing out of the blood vessels, out of the capillary beds, changing that pressure gradient in the blood vessels, in the capillary beds. So the flow of interstitial fluid is not as good back into the blood vessels, and it thickens the interstitial fluid. So it disrupts the whole messaging system that goes on within it. Remember, the interstitial fluid is a communication system. It's a communication medium. And when that density of it is disrupted by things that should not be in there, like albumin, you've got a problem. And that happens in a number of conditions, cancer. So here's the increased tension in the venous side equals increase in interstitial fluid. You've got chronic inflammation, so that would be your chronic infections. That would be cancer. Estrogen, high estrogen levels, overstimulation of ovaries. Now, this is interesting in terms of in vitro fertilization. Snake bites. There's all sorts of conditions. You'll see it. I see it mostly in chronic infections. A chronic infection to me, though, is one of the ways I think of them is a microbiome imbalance. Yeah, they disrupt the albumin balance between the interstitial fluid and the plasma in the blood vessels, making leaky blood vessels, thickening of the interstitial fluid. But luckily, we have Cleavers. Cleavers is this like little guy, sticks to everything. One time I was in this park and I was looking at these people getting their wedding pictures taken, and it was the ushers were in the bridegroom, no, the bridesmaid. You can see I'm not a big wedding person. Anyways, the ushers were all getting their pictures taken, and they must have walked through a patch of Cleavers, because all up their legs, all up the legs of their tuxedos were these green plants clinging to their black pants. It was kind of funny. But anyways, Cleavers cling. That's how you know you've got Cleavers. You'll feel it. Oh, yeah, this plant wants to stick to me. And it grows in, I often will find it in damp, shadowy areas. So you think about thick, shadowy, not moving, needs better flow soil. That's what you want to think. These plants actually degrade albumin when it's in the interstitial fluid. Isn't that cool? So you can help thin out. So you'll see people, they're puffy. They might have pain just under the surface of their skin. You give them some Cleavers, and a lot of that will clear out. Now, Cleavers is a lymphatic in my mind, more so than a diuretic. The diuretic effect is directly related to the emptying out of the excess interstitial fluid that hasn't been able to be reabsorbed into the venous circulation because of excess albumin in the interstitial fluid. I hope that makes sense. I hope I haven't just confused everybody. Yeah. So the thing is, this plant is contraindicated in conditions of dryness, because it's going to empty out. It's going to cause a diuretic effect, and you don't want to increase dryness. So they used to, these traditional physiologists believe that it was really the kidney that controlled interstitial fluid balance, but it's much more nuanced. The lymphatic system is very involved in the process. And this is an article you might just want to look at. Japanese knotweed, Renutria japonica, is probably one of my favorite plants for healing leaky capillary beds. It's an astringent. It's also high in flavonoids, so it helps tissues repair themselves. It's very drying. So again, this would be in a situation of excess moisture. You want to be careful not to use Japanese knotweed if someone's really dry. You'll aggravate that condition. So this would be the boggy person, not the person with big cracks in their tongues and cracking skin and just saying to you, I feel so dry. This is for the wet person, maybe a swollen tongue, swelling under their eyes. When they wear socks all day, they have little swelling around their ankles, lethargy, maybe brain fog. Goticola, a little more gentle. I love this plant, very gentle, very calming, lovely nervine, also very good for repairing blood vessels, particularly in the brain. Contraindicated with leaky blood vessels would be diaphoretics. Usually, if the capillary beds are leaky, you're going to have low blood pressure. You don't want to give someone who has low blood pressure diaphoretics, because what it will do is it will open up those capillary beds even more. Diaphoretics expand, help relax the tension in blood vessels. So you want to be really careful with that, because you can cause more problems using diaphoretics when there's a problem with blood vessel tension, low blood pressure. Their diaphoretics are indicated in high blood pressure. And you'll feel it in the pulse. So if the pulse is really like you can't find it, or it's deep, or it just feels like loose, or, it's not, it's kind of like mm, 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 moving very slowly, diaphoretics are contraindicated. That would be like thick fluids. So we have interstitial fluid and interstitial fluid. It is actually, interstitial fluid is like actually like a little bit of a jelly substance because of all that extracellular matrix. This image is a little bit, we're not like water. There's a lot of stuff in it. So it does have a thickness to it, but it's, you don't want it too thick. So signs of stagnation of interstitial fluid, I think one of I wake up in the morning and I've got like a lot of congestion in my sinus and my nose, snoring, lymphatic congestion. I often think sinus issues are related to lymphatic congestion, which can relate back to liver congestion, a lot of phlegm buildup, achy just under the skin, tender to touch, low grade headaches, stiffness dominant, particularly in the morning, or if you're at your computer all day and then you're going like this, oh, I gotta move my neck, oh, that feels so good, or I'm moving my shoulder, oh, that feels so good. That stiffness, that's like poor flow interstitial fluid. Chronic inflammation, any chronic inflammatory conditions have profound effect on the interstitial fluids movement, swelling around rings, socks, shoes, etc. And feeling better after movement, because it is the movement of our body that helps move the fluid in our body. That's that idea of the trampoline and the lymphatic system moving up and down. But going for a walk can move your fluids as well. It doesn't have to be some dramatic movement. It can be simple. So alternative herbs are really the key to supporting the health of interstitial fluid. So this is a kind of an example of interstitial fluid. um, Here we have, fluid that needs to be moving and fluid that's okay. Now, if you've had goldfish, and we have had goldfish in my house, always a bit scary to have them. But anyways, I don't have them anymore. No more goldfish in my house. You have to clean the goldfish bowl pretty much every day. You have to give those fish fresh water every day, because that water is not going anywhere. And you're putting some food in every day, but there's all this waste from the fish going into the water. There's also the oxygen gets used up in the water. This is not something that you can live in. And this, if there's not good movement, not replenishing of the water, poor filtration of the water, this is what happens. So you need this. Think of your alternative herbs. They clean out the fishbowl. Yeah, so this is another example of where you would use an alternative. They're the ones who go in there and sort everything out, make some space so that you can find what you need and you're not like wandering around in a muddle like, can't find anything. Yeah, this is what I call flat surface itis. This is a condition that's commonly found in many, many people. Flat surface itis. And it means that wherever there's a flat surface, something has to get piled up on it. Anyways, alternatives. Echinacea is an amazing alternative. It's one of my favorite alternatives. Echinacea is often thought of an immune stimulant, but what I really think of it is lymphatic. And it when you taste a good echinacea tincture, your mouth should go like bing, 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 bing. It's a very intense experience. And immediately upon tasting the echinacea, your if it's a good tincture, and not all echinacea tinctures have this effect, and therefore don't waste your money on them. You'll have this amazing amount of saliva just start pouring into your mouth to dilute down that intense flavor. Echinacea triggers all over your mouth, the roof of your mouth, your tongue, the back of your throat, your whole, yeah, everything just starts tingling and buzzing. And it's a fairly unpleasant experience. Whoa, saliva just starts flowing in there. And that in partially is an inflammatory response to dilute whatever that is that's causing that intense sensation in your mouth. That's echinacea, and it's doing that throughout your body. Where I think echinacea is a really powerful plant for moving interstitial fluid is in your guts. Your gut has more lymphatic tissue than any other part of your body, and it gets bogged down. Like if you're eating a lot of dairy or a lot of gluten, a lot of bread, not enough vegetables, it gets boggy in your gut. And echinacea is amazing for cleaning out the lymphatic system within the gut, and in turn moving that lymphatic system. Remember, the lymphatic system is the mop of the interstitial fluid, cleaning that up, especially if there's leaky gut. If you see anyone with leaky gut, echinacea is a really great plant to add to that formula, because some of that leakiness is going directly into interstitial fluid, and you want that lymphatic system working really well. And echinacea is an amazing lymphatic. Oregon grape, another beautiful alternative herb with, uh, I think of Oregon grape as a lymphatic. Um, I don't want to talk a lot of Oregon grape is very well known as a berberine herb, and berberine is an alkaloid that the roots of Oregon grape carry. And I did do a video on berberine herbs, so I leave you to discover that in that video. This is a little more nuanced medicine, and I find there is no plant that drains heat like Oregon grape, especially if it's like skin rashes or headaches. Like heat, you want to think about how heat rises, right? It goes up. Like I'm in an upstairs room right now, and there's a big staircase over to that side, and the wood stove is below me, and I hardly have any heat on in this space, and it's warm because the heat from the wood stove heats this space because the heat's rising up the stairs. Heat rises. Oregon grape is very good at draining heat down. Now, remember, temperature moves through water. So if the water isn't flowing well, the heat rises, warming the water, and it has to find its way out. And it will often try to come out through the skin, or it will go into pain. So Oregon grape really drains the heat, drains the fluid down and out, drains the heat. Very, very specific use for Oregon grape for me. Draining heat, moving the fluids down, pulling the heat down through the body. Burdock is such an interesting plant. I'm always a little confused about burdock, to be quite honest. This is the seed. Well, this is the flower. It hasn't gone to seed yet. And the seed is very specific to cancer, as it is the seed supports the health of connective tissue. And connective tissue is really important when you're supporting someone who has been diagnosed with cancer. But generally, one uses the root. And the root of echinacea or burdock is such an interesting plant because it's a bittersweet. Remember, we were talking about how the sweet can, like a lot of sugar, can thicken the interstitial fluid. It's not good for interstitial fluid. It's not good for the water element in the body, sugar. I actually think it's poison, but that's my opinion. Um, it's it's sweet in that it provides uh, good nourishment for the microbiome in the body, in the gut in particular. So that's that sweetness, but it's also a bitter, so it creates that movement throughout the body. It's a beautiful, gentle herb. If someone is in a depleted state, so sometimes if interstitial fluid is too thick, the nutrients aren't able to make it to the cells. The movement isn't good. Uh, this plant is so high in minerals that it helps not only drain out the excess fluid, but it supports the nourishment of the cells. Okay, so let's talk about another layer of movement in the body because this is really about movement for the interstitial fluid, and it's the pulse. So you want to think about your arterial blood vessels are all pulsing. It's more like this. And that pulse is traveling all through your whole body. Every and that pulse is moving the interstitial fluid, creating this gentle wave ripple through all the interstitial fluid in your body. So a really nice pulse, steady, strong but not too strong pulse is constantly bathing all the cells of your body. It's this gentle massage of all this interstitial fluid. So the pulse is really important. Now, different tissues have different densities. So the pulsation changes depending on the density of the tissues. So here's liver. So the liver, the way the interstitial fluid moves through the liver would be very different than the way the interstitial fluid would move through young lung tissue, which is much thinner. So just let yourself imagine water with more density, like muddy water has a different kind of pulsation than clear water. And that's an extreme example, but think of it like that. Okay, so there's this pulsation. So if the tissues are too tense, if you've got high blood pressure, there's like this pulsation. It's not nice and smooth. It's not like a easy delivery system. It's like someone's yelling at you and you just don't want to listen to them anymore. You just want to get out of the room. It's jagged, the pulse. It's too strong. Doesn't allow easeful communication between the capillary beds and the cells, or the cells and the cells. So you need that relaxed, easygoing pulse. And that, one of my favorite plants is cramp bark, to relax the tissues of the body. Tension limits the movement of water in the body. You need to relax the tissues open. This is particularly true when people are really cold. Often there's a lot of tension. Or you might look at someone's tongue and there's like all sorts of, there's different colors on the tongue. Like there's some red speckles and there's some, pale areas, or there might be a big red blotch somewhere and everything else is kind of purpley. And that's like a pocket of heat in the body where the fluid isn't moving and there's tension there, creating too much movement. That water can't flow out. So what you need to do is you need to relax the tissues, open up the pulsation in that area so the heat can flow out. And that would be with plants like crab bark. Lobelia is another plant I use a lot for this kind of thing, to move it. They call it trapped heat. You'll see it, trapped heat. That's basically the fluid isn't moving in a good way and it's stuck and there's too much tension, creating too much vibration in one little area of the body. And so you relax it. Also, you can add, you could use castor oil packs over that area. That will help relax the tension as well. Nervines, hawthorn leaf and flowers, another really nice one, particularly if the pulse is really tense. This is where you want to get out your diaphoretics, relax the pulse, relax the tension in the pulse, relax the high blood pressure. That relaxes the tissues throughout the body, eases the movement of the fluid. There's a lot of diaphoretics. Another one of my favorite ones is elderflower. It's a really beautiful diaphoretic. Linden flower. A lot of flowers. So then we have to look at the balance of the fluid in the extracellular spaces or the interstitial fluid and the intercellular spaces or the intercellular fluid. And this is an interesting, the body is so amazing. So we have, sodium tends to gather in the extracellular spaces or in the interstitial fluid, and inside the cell is potassium, and they both have a positive charge. So they're like trying to put two magnets together. They repel each other. They push against each other, and that keeps the fluid balance between inside the cell and outside the cell, is that pushing against these two. Now you can run into problems, like you can have a really high salt diet, which then fluid's going to collect into the interstitial fluid, and you're going to get all this like puffiness and like the high blood pressure thing going on, hard on your kidneys. And you're going to dehydrate your cells because you're shifting that pressure balance, and the fluid's going to get pulled into the interstitial fluid and out of your cells, which is not great. So not too much salt, but some salt, natural salts. What you need is lots of potassium, and potassium is found in plants like vegetables. So eat lots of vegetables and you'll help keep that fluid balance between your interstitial fluid and your kidneys, or not your kidneys, your cells. So really high potassium plant is dandelion leaf. I'll tell you a funny story. I once had this client, and I think I can't remember. It was a long time ago, but I think it was bladder infection. She had this like chronic kind of intermittent bladder infection that would come and go, come and go. So I gave her some uh, marshmallow root, and I think it was like probably marshmallow root and yarrow thyme or something like that. Anyways, she did really well. The bladder infection cleared up, and then she was kind of hard to convince that she didn't need to keep taking the marshmallow root after a couple of months with no bladder infection. She's a little challenging to navigate that with her. People tend to think herbs are like drugs. Herbs are not addictive. Many pharmaceutical drugs are addictive. They might not be psychologically addictive, but the body becomes addicted to them to fulfill a function, right? Or they shut down a function of the body. Cortisol is like that, antacids are like that. Even non-steroids, anti-inflammatories have an addictive property. If you stop taking them, you start getting more pain. Um, Anyways, that's a whole aside. Plants aren't like that. Plants don't do that. Well, most plants. There are some plants that are addictive, but most plants are not like that. Okay, so she's taking this marshmallow. She's better, basically. And for some reason, her doctor said she should not be on high potassium diet. Something about her kidneys and this infection, and would be good to avoid potassium. This is what the doc said. And it was like, what? And so then she got mad at me because she thought I was poisoning her with marshmallow root because it's high in potassium. But it's such crazy medicine because we need lots of potassium to keep that fluid balance between our cells and the interstitial fluid. Without that balance system, our cells can't function well. And if you go on a low potassium diet, that basically means that you're not eating plants. You can't have herbal medicine and no potassium. And I have seen people on low potassium diets and they can't even have broccoli. Now, if someone's on dialysis, that's a whole nother ball game. But generally, we need lots of potassium. And what we don't have, what the body doesn't need, it will eliminate through the kidney. So eat your vegetables. The other thing about the interstitial fluid is it's an alkaline environment. And it's really important, that alkaline environment, for the health of the cell receptors on the cells. The cells receptors are what are gathering what they need from the interstitial fluid. Oh, there's some, magnesium. I'll have a little magnesium today. Oh, well, there's some more oxygen. Oh, yeah, I need the energy. I'll take some oxygen. So the alkaline environment of the interstitial fluid is really important for this communication network to happen. If it's acidic, that will affect the balance of communication. So you can use, again, plant medicine to alkalize the interstitial fluid. And alfalfa is a beautiful plant for that, and very high in minerals. Alfalfa also has that diuretic effect. So if there's a lot of puffiness in the interstitial fluid, you can use alfalfa for this too. And some people suggest that it's the alkalizing effect of the interstitial fluid that supports people who are struggling with type 2 diabetes. However, sugar is very acidic. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, you're probably going to have a more acidic environment, which gives rise to type 2 diabetes. So it's kind of a vicious cycle there. So you got to get rid of the sugar, the white sugar, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about some traditional medicine ideas around interstitial fluid. So in humoral medicine, one would say that the phlegmatic is the one who has the most challenges with the stagnation of interstitial fluid, and it's basically a lack of movement. So with these folks, with the phlegmatic, you want to use alternatives that move fluid. And for this type of condition, often the fluid gathers in the pelvic region, around the hips, the thighs. Mm, My favorite plant for this would be black cohosh, hands down. And black cohosh is very specific for moving stagnancy in the pelvis. So that's one of the reasons why we use it for women who have really clotty cycles, or where it used to be rheumatism, that achy pain in the pelvic region, very specific to that. It really it moves what I call pelvic congestion, which is very common in the phlegmatic person. The phlegmat, and but it's also I also, black cohosh is also really great for moving the fluid in the spine, through the neck, and the brain. A black cohosh is an extremely complex plant. It's such a valuable plant in the apothecary, and it's one of my top 10 favorite plants. All these body types, the sanguine, chloritic, and melancholy, have sort of a different kind of challenge with interstitial fluids. So for example, the chloritic tend to be hot. And so when there's a lot of heat in the body, what happens when things are really hot, right? Think of deserts, right? There's not a lot of fluid. It gets absorbed back. It gets evaporated by the heat. The heat dries out tissue. So with the chloritic, instead of using plants that are going to drain fluids, you want to put the fluids in. You're going to use your demulcents, maybe like your linden flower is really beautiful. It's a demulcent for blood vessels, very calming, very nourishing, very moist. Your marshmallow, anything that has water. Alfalfa is a really nice plant for the chloritic, even though it's a diaphoretic, but it creates an alkaline environment. The sanguine is the total extrovert, super fun, lots of energy. But again, it's very outward moving. You want it, and it uses up energy. Again, there's heat with the sanguine. So you want to like cooling, nourishing plants. Again, we're into like I don't think we have to be as strong with as the demulcents with the chlorotic, but here we're going to be with the sanguine, we're looking at more like the plants that are high in flavonoids, like you might be looking at hawthorn leaf and flower, or looking at Sandra, as long as they're not a cycling woman, or you might be looking at hibiscus, these plants are really high in flavonoids, to cool them off, recenter them, bring that calm to their body. The melancholy, well, that's a problem with movement again. So, like the phlegmatic, we've got a problem with movement, but we also have a problem where someone spends a lot of time in their head. So, we got to drain things down. Whereas here, we want to have with the phlegmatic, we want to like balance out the fluid throughout the body. Here, we want to drain it out of the head, move it down through the whole body. Yeah, so Oregon grape is a good one here for pulling the fluid down. Bitters are really good, moving the fluid down. Um, Plant like a little bit of gentian is a really good remedy for melancholic, and you're almost bordering on like homeopathy there. Whereas like treats like. Not that the melancholic is bitter, but they can see the challenges in life. They're very philosophical, like how and why is this happening? In traditional Chinese medicine, they have an organ system. I don't know if that's the correct term. I am not a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, although I have a profound appreciation for traditional Chinese medicine. And particularly what I really enjoy about traditional medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, is that it looks at the relationship between the body, mind, and the environment. And that to me is fundamental in herbal medicine, an understanding of how the environment affects the body mind and how the body mind affects the environment. So, things like seasonal eating, or, sleeping when it's dark and not when it's light, like all that. It's like we are so tuned into our environment, and it has such a profound effect in our life. If we can move more in flow with the environment around us, the better our health is. Anyways, the triple wormer, super interesting system, a real head scratcher for someone with Western kind of anatomy and physiology understanding. Sometimes you'll hear people say that the triple wormer is like the lymphatic system. I don't know about that. I think I really like this idea that the triple warmer is about the distribution of heat throughout the body. And you have three different areas. You have the chest, you have the middle of the body where the liver, the stomach, the pancreas, the spleen is, and then you have the lower burner where basically your colon, small intestine, bladder, sex organs are. And in my experience as a herbalist, what I have seen is heat gets trapped in these different areas of the body. So sometimes heat is trapped up here, but everything else is cold. Or heat is trapped like a smoker. The heat is all trapped up here. And then there's cold down here. This is all cold and dried out down here because there's so much heat up here. And remember that the interstitial fluid, the fluid in the body, is what moves the fire element throughout the body. So if there is dryness in one area of the body, or a lot of tension in an area of the body, there's going to be a problem with the movement of heat through the body. And that's how I see the triple warmer working. So where is that heat, and how is it not moving? And how can I bring moisture and movement to that area to diffuse the heat, to move the heat, to relax the tension, or bring the moisture so we can move the heat? So for example, let's just go back to the smoker with dry lungs. You're going to be using moistening plants. You might decide, I really want to use some Solomon seal here, because I really like Solomon seal in the lungs. I find it a really nice plant. Or I want to use sort of a paradoxical plant like mullein, just to bring moisture and cleanse and cool the heat in this area of the body. So that's triple warmer. And I think of the interstitial fluid. It's not just the mucosa and the tissues, but what's actually drying out is the interstitial fluid. Yeah, so let's just finish with this lovely plant, prickly ash, Americanum, Xanthoxylum americanum. Should be a lowercase a. Sorry about that. Yeah, prickly ash is a plant I use a lot. It's There's so much of it where I live. It's so easy to come by, go out, get some twigs, make a tincture. It In some ways for me, it's similar to Echinacea, but more aggressive. It's an alternative. And what prickly ash does is it really just uh, creates a flow of the interstitial fluid out. So if there's a lot of trapped heat in the core of the body and coldness here in your hands and feet, or like you can see that, like, oh, there's a lot of tension and trapped heat, the fluid isn't flowing, carrying the heat out. I love prickly ash for that. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video and got you thinking about how to move the water element in the body and where the water element is and what it's doing and why it's so important and how to assess it a little bit in your clients. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more videos, especially the extracellular matrix, because the two fit together. Okay, bye.